Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, we're going to continue with the sixth chapter in Al-Arba'in fi Usul-Din. We are in the first quarter of the book where Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah speaks of aqa'id and necessary beliefs so that we may build our ibadah and our worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon the correct belief. We start here with Al-Aslu Sadis, the sixth principle, fi sam'i wal basar, regarding hearing and seeing, as-sam' wal basar. These are two attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, divine attributes, eternal attributes. He says here, وَأَنَّهُ تَعَالَى سَمِيعٌ بَصِيرٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is hearing and seeing. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears everything, He sees everything. يَسْمَعُ وَيَرَى. He hears and He sees. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not deaf. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not blind. لا يعزب عن سمعه مسموع وإن خفي ولا يغيب عن رؤيته مرئي وإن دق. No sound, no matter how low, escapes His hearing. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears absolutely everything in existence, even the most minute sound that our ears cannot perceive. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He hears it. And nothing seen is hidden from His vision, no matter how minute. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He hears every single thing, irrespective of how low the sound is. He sees everything, irrespective of how small it may be. ولا يحجب سمعه بعد ولا يدفع رؤيته ظلام. Neither does distance block His hearing, nor darkness obscure His vision. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He hears everything, He sees everything. He says here, distance doesn't block His hearing. For us, when something is further away, we don't hear it as well. When something is dark, we don't see it as well. The reason for this is human hearing and the hearing of creation requires sound waves to go into these organs that we have, and then the organs can perceive that sound. There has to be a distance between subject A and B, and subject B is causing the sound, some movement in the airwaves, and then there is a wave, sound wave, and it reaches the one that hears. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we mentioned previously, He's not confined in a space, He's not a physical body. He doesn't require things like sound waves to reach Him because He's not in a place. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hearing is not like the hearing of His creation. He doesn't have limbs to hear. He hears as part of His essence and His existence. So it doesn't matter if the thing has sound waves. It doesn't need to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It actually cannot reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala physically. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears it as it is, which is very different than the hearing of the creation. Similarly, the creation, they see things due to the distance and the light waves, the waves of light hitting that object and coming into the eye. And that's why when something is very dark, we cannot see, because there's no light bouncing off of that thing coming into our eye. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't have eyeballs. He's not a physical creature. So it doesn't matter if light waves don't have to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He sees things as they are, without needing them to reach Him. So this is a type of seeing that we cannot compare with anything else, because we do not have examples of this in the creation itself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He does hear, He does see. However, it's not like any of His creation, as we mentioned before, the beautiful verse of the Quran, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. There is nothing like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you cannot compare Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hearing or His seeing with anything of His creation. يَرَى مِنْ غَيْرِ حَدَقَةٍ وَأَجْفَانٍ وَيَسْمَعُ مِنْ غَيْرِ أَصْمِخَةٍ وَآذَانٍ. He sees without an eyeball or eyelids, and He hears without an auditory canal or ears. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not a physical body. He's not in a particular space. He's not like a a large man in outer space or above space, etc. He sees, he doesn't have eyeballs, he doesn't have eyelids, he doesn't resemble any of his creation. He was there before time and space, and he didn't change after creating time and space. So he is not limited by time and space. Thus, he does not occupy space. He's not a physical body. He doesn't have eyeballs or eyelids. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears without an ear canal or ears. He doesn't need ears to hear. His hearing is part of his essence. His sight, his seeing is part of his essence. كما يعلم من غير قلب ويبطش بغير جارحة. In the same way, he knows without a heart, grasps without a limb. ويخلق بغير آلة, and creates without a tool. So because of the same principle that we're saying, that Allah's transcendence is beyond whatever we can fathom. We cannot compare Allah with anything. So because of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows without a heart or brain. Allah doesn't have a brain. He doesn't need a physical tissue to think. It's part of his essence. He grasps without a limb. He doesn't need to have limbs to grasp something. This doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reaches out. There's no limb. There's no physical touching. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, everything is in his might, his batash. Inna batasha rabbika lashadid. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the grip of your Lord is mighty. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can grip things, meaning they are gripped by his pressure, by his power, without him having to touch it, because he is transcendent from physicality. He creates without a tool. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not require things to make stuff. It's an automatic thing that happens when Allah wills. His power is such that he doesn't have to touch anything. There's no limbs, there's nothing like that involved. It's pure power from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Transcendent is he. إذ لا تشبه صفاته صفات الخلق كما لا تشبه ذاته ذات الخلق. Why is all of this? For his attributes do not resemble the attributes of the creation, just as his essence does not resemble the essence of the creation. We cannot fathom Allah. That's the end result. If you're saying, okay, how is this even possible? How can you hear without an eye? How can you hear without ears? How can you see without an eye? How can you grasp without hands? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond comprehension. He tells us that he sees, he hears, he grasps, he knows. And this is how we understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is beyond comprehension, beyond comparison, and this is his might. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond time and space. We know that he created the entire universe. We see that the universe is extremely intricate. Someone without a will, someone without life, someone without power, someone without knowledge, someone without hearing and seeing could not have made the universe. So the universe itself is a proof that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created all of this. And that's how we know that he exists, along with the wahi and the revelation that he sent to us through Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is the sixth principle in this regard, inshallah. Stay tuned as we will go to the seventh principle next, inshallah. جزاكم الله خيرا وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى على خير خلق محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.